that if we look at puberty blockers are reversible. So when we come...
Puberty blockers are medicines that prevent puberty from happening. They work by blocking the hormones, testosterone and estrogen that lead to puberty-related changes in your body. Planned Parenthood. Okay, so that's incorrect. Hey everyone, my name is Alex Daly and I am a 25-year-old transsexual who lives in New South Wales, Australia. I do have a lot of strong opinions when it comes to where trans issues do fall in regards to politics. Myself, I do find that I fall more onto the conservative side and the Republican side of politics versus to the left wing and the liberal side of politics. I did used to believe quite strongly and be quite a leftist. In the past couple of years, I have found myself falling a little bit more into the Republican and conservative viewpoint of these issues. So today I'm going to watch another middle ground video from Jubilee. It is a video where it's going to be discussing between detransitioners and transitioners. And the topics are going to cover a couple of things. I think the main part of the video that I'm going to focus on is, should minors be allowed to transition? My standpoint when it comes to if minors should be allowed to transition is that trans youth don't even exist at all. It is something that is actually just gender dysphoria forming in these children, and these children should be receiving medical help from therapists and psychiatrists that are helping them lean more towards the gender that they were born. And then if down the track, once they're an adult and they're 18 years old or older and they've gone through puberty, it's at that point that I think that if they're still pushing to want to become the opposite gender and if they're still wanting to transition at that point and they've gone through all the routes of psychiatry and whatnot, then yes, then they should be allowed to transition, but not at all before. Okay, so I'm going to start the video.
Raise your hand if you feel attacked by the opposite side. Step forward if you agree with the prompt. Gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
So the first prompt is, gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
I repeat, gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
Medical transition is no place for a child. I transition as an adult and I have medical complications. I have mental health issues. Child cannot consent to a medical transition because kids want to eat ice cream every day. It doesn't mean that they should.
I kind of agree with you on that as well because we have so many rules and regulations when it comes to tobacco or alcohol or any type of drugs. Driving a car, you can't even rent a motel until you're like 25. There's some specific things that we need to put into place that I think would help protect our children because the minors themselves really don't know who they are until they become 25, 26 years old. Their minds aren't fully developed and it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
So I did transition as a minor. I was a teenager.
You can see straight away there is obviously negative side effects of putting kids on puberty blockers or hormones at all. Luca is a female. She was born a female and she's obviously transitioned when she was a minor and she has now detransitioned, but that voice is something that she's going to have to live with forever because when it comes to hormones, taking testosterone is so powerful and is so aggressive on the body. So many of the effects of it cannot be undone, like the voice. When your voice gets deeper, it is almost virtually impossible for you to go back in the opposite direction. It's not like you can just put someone back on estrogen and their voice gets higher. That's not something that happens. When you put any male or anything onto estrogen, their voice doesn't get higher, but when you put a female on testosterone, their voice gets deeper and it's irreversible. You can get surgeries and you can go through vocal training with a speech pathologist. There is no way for them to get their voice back to where it used to be. So straight away you can see that with Luca.
I was a teenager who had a lot of mental health issues and had been sexually exploited and hated my body. And it ended with me kind of finding spaces where that was twisted into no, you're just a boy in the wrong body. And it ended with me having my first ever medical intervention being a double mastectomy at 16 before any hormones, before anything else. And because of transitioning at such a young age, in the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me. You know, I have constant joint pain. I've watched my muscle mass waste away. I've watched my vocal cords hurt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to carry a child. The evidence we have suggests that the best way to figure out if gender dysphoria persists into adulthood is to let them grow up.
She's completely right. You can't be trans if you haven't gone through puberty. You have to go through puberty and become an adult as the gender you were born in order for you to know at all that you are not that gender that you were born. For you to make an educated decision for yourself as to whether or not you want to go do something as drastic as transitioning. It's really devastating.
Because a lot of these kids will grow out of it, and many of them will just grow up and end up being gay or gender nonconforming.
Yep.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
I mean, if we're going to be honest, every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for trans youth. They say it's safe and it's life-saving. And there are numerous studies that back that up.
The study that backs it up for puberty blockers is the Dutch protocol, and the same scientists—
I have 10 studies that I can bring to you right now.
The same scientists that brought that up have since rolled it back and said it was never supposed to be applied the way it has. The American medical industry, we all know, is money hungry and has gone off the rails.
I do agree that there are definitely some doctors out there that may be taking advantage of trans people, and I'm sorry that you went through this. Truly, I really am sorry. But trans kids are valid, and it's not a decision that they're making.
Right.
It's healthcare.
I want to speak to that real quick. Like, I came out 13 years ago when I was 14, and I knew, not that I was trans, but that I was a boy. I had to go through a lengthy process of therapy and seeing an endocrinologist and like go through different tests and exams to make sure that this was real to everyone else involved. Transitioning and being trans was just a process I went through to become who I always knew I was.
Okay, pause. So the issue that I find that we have when it comes to a lot of people who are trans and do grow up to be an adult and then decide to go forward with transitioning is that you'll find that from a very, 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 very young age, these kids who will have grown up to become adults and then transitioned, that they knew for a long time. They always knew that they were trans or that they were going to be, wanted to be the other gender. And the issue is it's so hard to be able to pinpoint who is struggling with that and who isn't struggling with that. But here's my counterpoint to that. And instead of saying we should just transition every minor who says that they are the opposite gender, is we let every child become an adult. And once they go through puberty and they are an adult, they get to make adult choices like transitioning. The thing is, when you decide to transition when you're an adult, you then also know 100%, oh, this is the gender I was born. It doesn't feel right, and I will not give up on that point. So then you go forward with transitioning. So when you do transition, you're going to sit in 100% certainty that it was the right thing for you, and you're not going to have regret, and you're not going to detransition.
You know, it wasn't a like decision that I made. It was a life or death thing for me. And if I hadn't gotten on hormones and gotten surgery at 16, I don't know if I would be here.
As a father, I have 4 kids, and so, and also as a trans person, I think that knowing what it looked like for me as a child, and that experience of going through all of the turmoil and all of the trepidation around my gender identity, I would not put my children in that situation. And also, I don't think that surgeries should be allowed for minors. Like, when we look at the data and we look at the statistics and we look at the research, the vast majority of these surgeries are happening to adults. They're not minors. Yeah. So let's start there, right? And then further than that, if we look at puberty blockers are reversible. So when we come—
Puberty blockers are medicines that prevent puberty from happening. They work by blocking the hormones, testosterone and estrogen that lead to puberty-related changes in your body. Planned Parenthood. Okay, so that's incorrect. I mean, yes, it does do that, and yes, they are used in cases where people go through puberty too early and they want to push that off until they're at a more appropriate age to go through puberty. In fact, it is a drug that is also used by doctors to give to sexual predators, people who have committed sexual assaults. What it does is it essentially castrates them. And there's a whole list of negative effects of what it actually does to your child. If you put a kid on it between the ages of 11 to 12, they will never grow up to be able to actually have sexual gratification as an adult. What it also does is it sterilizes your child. So your child will never be able to have children, or they'll be very unlikely to have children. Also, puberty is something natural that you're supposed to go through, yes, at an appropriate age. So the times that these drugs are appropriate to use is on a child who has started going through their menstrual cycle or through puberty at too young of an age. But puberty itself is something that we all go through. And what it does is, yes, it makes us feel very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable age for everyone in everyone's lives. But it is something that we're supposed to go through. Young children can sometimes, when they're looking for answers as to why they feel so awkward, why they don't feel right in their bodies, it's just puberty. Puberty is supposed to feel that way. Puberty has a lot of things that feel very similar to being gender dysphoric, but it does not mean that they are, like, they have gender dysphoria, and it does not, and even if they do, it still does not mean that they are supposed to be transitioned. They're supposed to grow up to the age of an adult, and then they can make those choices if they're still appropriate for them. There's a lot of disinformation. I hate that word. But there is a lot of disinformation, and in this case, I think it is important that people do know that when it comes to puberty blockers, they are not good for your children. We should not be putting our children on them. You are taking their ability to have kids one day away from them at an age that they are too young to decide that for themselves. You are taking a natural human experience that is going through puberty away from them. It is not something that is easy. Growing up is not easy, but it is not something that we just hide and shelter our kids from. It is something that you let them go through, and it is something that they need to go through to become an adult, and then once they're an adult, they make those choices.
To children, when we talk about puberty blockers, that gives them a shot. Yeah. And it gives them autonomy over their bodies. It gives them a space that they can explore their expression. They can explore who they are without surgeries, without all of these other things that could have permanent effects. My kids were maybe 8.
Unfortunately, I think he's a bit ill-informed. Puberty blockers do have permanent effects on the body. Blocking someone's puberty, unless called for when they go through puberty too soon, is a negative permanent effect on the body. You have to let these kids go through puberty.
My kids were maybe 8 and 10 when I started my transition, and so I talked to them in kid terms. I told my son, I said, look, you know, your mom, dad wants to be a dad because that's how I feel. And my kids being so young, they understood it. They were like, okay, we're with it, you know. And so as they got older, I would bring them into my world and get them to understand the things that maybe I was going through. But now that they're adults, they understand differences in people, not just trans people, but people in general.
So,
unfortunately, I still feel as though that might have been a form of indoctrination. This is a controversial opinion. I really don't know if trans people should be having kids. And as much as I would love to have a kid one day, as much as I know that there are lots of trans people who would love to have kids, and that is a really, really big thing that most people would love to be able to do one day, I don't know if it's fair for the child to be introducing them to what trans is at such a young age. I don't think that it's okay for them to be growing up with these questions about gender and then questioning their own gender. And we've already seen the effects that the woke mind virus has on children and this new generation. We already see the effects of the spike in number of kids who are transitioning. I don't know if that's okay. I don't know if it is, I don't know if it isn't, but in my opinion, I think that it's unfair to the kids at the end of the day. It's a difficult point because, like, I would love to have kids, but I just don't know if it's fair on the kids at the end of the day.
So there is such thing as gender fluid. How
Yes.
do you know that this kid is not going to change their gender expression later on? We really actually don't have studies on children that are taken over long term, like over 10 years, 20 years. You've only been on testosterone 14 years. One of the oldest trans men, Buck Angel, he almost died from testosterone. You're saying right now it saved your life, you may still die from it. You don't know. You're
die
still
happy.
Exactly.
That's cooked. That's actually cooked. You'll die happy. See, that's where the delusion part of it all comes in. Like, no mental illness, like gender dysphoria, should be treated with something like transitioning at the cost of one's life. Like, that's silly. That's just silly behavior.
You'll die for ideology, and a lot of people have died for an ideology.
It's not an ideology.
But we have more
is.
people that are dying because
It's an
they're not
idea that you were
allowed
born
to
in the wrong
express
body.
themselves. Look at the suicide rate of transmasculine folks. It is at 55%. And one of the factors that could save their lives is support, right? And so if we have folks that are committing suicide because they're not allowed to transition.
I'm not sure what the statistics are for trans men committing suicide. I'll pop it up here. But in reality, these people deserve psychiatric help. They deserve therapy. They deserve doctors who aren't just affirming them into making choices that can lead to them dying, like this other trans person just said just now. It is true. Like, they're dying for an ideology. A lot of people have done that throughout history, died for an ideology, because it's something that they thought was right. It's something that they feel is right. Just because something feels right and just because something they believe innately it is right doesn't mean it is right. Unless you're looking at the truth and at the facts and what is objective, it's not worth dying for. Your mental health needs to be assessed and you need to be given the help you need, but that isn't at the cost of one's own life.
The transition for
thing-
children or minors is something that shouldn't be done.
I am very sensitive to this subject, as I've been the person who has had to talk people off the ledge when it comes to suicidality. The discussion around how we talk about suicide is a very dangerous one in this community. You know, my parents were told, do you want a dead daughter or a living son? That's not an appropriate way to talk about that.
And I understand that, but
And
it is our transmasculine youth
I understand
that
that.
are at the highest risk
I
of
understand that,
suicide.
and they deserve help. But we also need to have a responsible conversation that is not using suicide as a means to push them down a pipeline before they have that comprehensive care.
100% right. It's blackmail from the doctors. That's what it is. It's blackmail pushing an ideology to push someone, down a pipeline that may not be right for them, and in a lot of cases, if not most cases, when it comes to minors, is not the right option for them.
Care.
So I have a question.
So, Aris, I know you've been wanting to say
Yeah,
something.
no, because I have a big problem. Oh, yeah, no, so I'm not an interrupter. What I'm going to say is we insult children, our youth, so much by taking away their autonomy and their own agency over their own decisions and insulting that they know who they are. Like, an adult knows who they are.
I'm going to be honest, the adult does know them more than they do themselves. They're children. They're not fully developed. They don't know anything. Children don't know anything. Why do you think in the United States, when it comes to being the president of the United States, you have to be 35 or older? It's because even then we are aware that people's political ideology, it generally takes some time for it to settle in. People at the age of 20 to 35 still don't really even know who they are. When it gets to being 35, then it makes sense to be president. When it comes to being trans, let's keep it at 18, but I wouldn't be offended if people said, like, let's make it 25. When a man is fully developed and in the frontal lobe, and then for girls, like, I would say probably around the same age, even though, yes, girls develop at a much faster rate than men when it comes to their maturity. I would still say make them wait, because I know a lot of girls who didn't think that they even wanted to have children when they were between the ages of 18 to 25. But then when they were around the ages of 30, like, that's what they did want. It's like we change so much as people. Imagine, like, if we just gave children a chance to grow up and then realize what they are and then make choices accordingly, we'd be in a much better position. The LGBT would be seen in a much better light. The fact that acceptance rate of the LGBT and of just trans people in general has been going down in the past few years, since I think 2013. Like, it's It's really unfortunate.
And it's always been that way. I've always known who I was. I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. I just had to adjust my body. And so I think taking away kids' agency and the right to their own body is, it's anti-human.
It's not anti-human. It's called being a child. As a child, the only rights that you have is to live your life as a child. Like you get to be an adult. You get to make adult choices when you're an adult, and transitioning is not a childhood choice. It is not something that you get to choose as a child, because there are things that are even less like important that kids can't even decide for themselves, that we rely on their parents to make for them, for the governments to decide policies for them. We need to realize that kids are not old enough to make life-altering choices like this.
Minors should be able to get tattoos or plastic surgery or consent to the list of other.
That's so different.
I
That's so
understand.
different.
Hold on,
I
let me
understand they
answer
are
this question
different
for
things,
you.
but to what
No, you
level
can't
do
even
we?
make that
No, to what level do we give children bodily autonomy over everything they do? Because here's the thing: children need barriers in childhood development. You need barriers, and they need a safe way to push against those barriers. And I worry with the current medical system that instead of giving them a safe way to express themselves and push against barriers, we have taken some of those barriers away. And that is why you see more detransitioners, because those barriers have been lifted.
Yeah, they're not just doling out surgeries for children.
It is happening. It actually is happening. I'll put some examples on the screen. This is happening.
That's not happening
I had a
anywhere.
letter from a therapist in a single visit at the gender clinic office
And
before
that
I
was
had
abuse
the
from
first.
that therapist who did
Yeah,
not
that-
Yeah, that's
psychoanalyze
awful.
the
That
rest
should
of your
not
issues.
happen.
Right, and that shouldn't
because
have happened.
your
That
issues
shouldn't
weren't
happen to
being trans. There were a lot of other issues that you were
I have a
addressing right
diagnosis
now.
of gender dysphoria as
And
well.
you shouldn't. You were misdiagnosed.
No, I have one.
Right.
Yeah, you had to get a second opinion, honey.
And
No, like the issue is that you can have gender dysphoria, but that doesn't mean that you transition. Gender dysphoria is something that's treatable, and it's not with gender affirming surgery, it's not with gender affirming care, it's not with gender affirming therapy. What it is, it's giving them a little bit of hard love and saying, hey, no, grow up the gender that you were born. We're going to tell you why that this is such a great thing. We're going to tell you all the things that will make you come back to reality and see what gender you were born, and then grow up to be it. And then if we're still at a point where there's no other alternative, and it has to be that there is no other alternative, that's when you go forward with transitioning. It's got to be a hard route. It's got to be something that's gatekept. It's something that has to be really difficult to go forward with doing. And it's not something that should just be willy-nilly chosen. Like, it should be something that you have to really undergo a lot of hard paths and hard decisions to get there. Like, there needs to be a lot more research done. There needs to be a lot more barriers, like she was saying. There needs to be a lot more barriers that stop people from going forward down this path, because it's not right for everyone, especially at the rate that we see these people transitioning. It needs to stop.
told
That's
that I
not
would
your
kill
fault.
myself.
But your
Yeah, that's not your
parents,
fault.
your parents,
Their biggest crime in all this was trusting in a medical system that they thought would help me, and the professionals apparently not doing the right thing
I
here.
understand, but your
Yeah,
parents were
absolutely
responsible for the decisions that were made on your behalf.
Her parents were blackmailed with the life of her child. Yes, boy. Where are you? Hello?
I think that what this really highlights is the importance of you sharing your story, because what it shows is that you can't jump into these transitions, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't listen to these doctors that push you to transition just
Nobody
because you're feeling a
should.
certain way.
So that was part one of the detransitioners versus the transitioners Jubilee video. I'm going to be posting the rest of this video slowly, bit by bit, over the course of the next couple of weeks. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this video. My name is Alex Daly, and thank you so much for watching.